Hello, my name's Luke Angsteadt. I'm the author of the book The Musings of De La Pew. It's a 20-year investigation into the nature of reality, the nature of the universe, God, existence, human beings, and the relationship between all of them. I'm here at the Hollow again with Bob Craft, who is a constitutional law expert. Bob is presently in the middle of a common law case that he has brought against the Sarasota County School District with regards to sexually explicit reading material that has been introduced into the school curriculum. And so without any further ado, I want Bob to share with our audience and myself the details and the fine points of this case right now. So Bob, thank you for being here and
Yeah,
share it with
absolutely.
me. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me. So the case came forward. Basically, I would say the best example is I got lured into it. I had heard about some of the things. I don't really watch TV. I pretty much read books. And I had heard about some of the things that were going on between the legislature, the governor, and Sarasota County Schools. Plus, I knew some parents that were in the school district, and I went up to see myself what was actually happening. When I got there, what I observed was, I guess the best word would be concerning. The behavior of the school, of the elected representatives, and the materials that were actually in the schools, in my opinion, were reprehensible for public use. So I went to make a speech at one of the meetings, the second meeting I had showed up to, and the school board was so authoritative. They were basically talking to the parents as if they were children, and correcting them on what bad behavior is, while they themselves were the orchestrators of the bad behavior, and they were degrading the people in the audience. And then when it was time to speak, they actually removed everyone and then finished the meeting on their own and told everyone they'd bring them back so that they could have citizen input. They never did. And so I was deprived of my First Amendment right to speak. And from that point on, it just escalated further and further. After doing some research, and I've been on this road to figure out how to bring forth common law cases under the preamble of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights for about 3 years. I've read, well, you don't know, I've read a couple hundred books, 200, I think I'm at 270 something right now. And I went all the way back to, before our forefathers, and went back to what books were printed when they wrote the Constitution and where the Constitution actually came from. So I studied Plato, and I've studied Aristotle and Plutarch, most of the Greek philosophers, John Locke. Also studied our forefathers, Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. I have their writings. And I started to realize where the Constitution was actually written out of and how it had been brought forth. And I think that that was the education that they had then, and that was their understanding back then. So as I started to grasp this concept, I really laid down the idea that we are actually operating on a two-dimensional system, and we don't understand it. And I'm going off on a tangent. We'll get back into that.
No, it's okay.
So I've filed multiple cases testing the system in different ways against government entities, mostly Charlotte County, because of my personal issues with them or my personal controversies that haven't been dealt with yet with them. Trying to figure out exactly how this thing applies, to try and understand that we were told all these things. We were given this big promise our whole life. Well, how do you fulfill the promise? Because I want my promise. I was promised something and I want it. So, and this was the most refined version of finally getting this mechanism off the ground. While it's not perfect, I've already found mistakes in it, the verbiage that I've made. It is the most perfect of the versions I have, and it looks like it's going to fly. So, I don't know how many planes the Wright brothers flew into the ground We're going to talk about the one they flew on. So hopefully this is it. I think it is. The judge proceedings, or the hearing was last Wednesday, August 3rd, 10 o'clock. It was an hour hearing. We battled it out, and it's been 6 days. The judge is still deliberating.
Yeah, and that does not bode well for her, right? I mean, as far as coming up with a speedy, I mean, they say a reasonable speedy time. I mean, what kind of time frame are we talking about where she should have a decision on what's going to happen next? I mean,
yeah. So there, of course, like all things and all decisions, there are a lot of factors that play into that. There is definitely a political factor. We're coming up into the elections right now. And that's going to play a factor because there's a big controversy about the school board. Also, I have put her in a very complicated situation. The judge, based on what came out in the hearing, or what my argument was to the attorney's argument, and my goals that were in that, which were really, it wasn't just about bringing forth the books. The books, in my opinion, need to be decided by a jury whether they can be in public or they can be in private. That will establish general common law in Sarasota County, and those books will not be in public anymore as long as those laws stand. That's what common law is. Declaratory judgment of fact says this book is private, therefore it will not be in a library, it will not be in a school, it will not be anywhere because a jury said that's the way it's going to be, and that's the end of it. So that's one part, the behavior of the school board representatives, and I don't call them officials, I don't call them authoritarians, I don't call them leaders. They are representatives of the people's will, and until we start using proper terms, we cannot get to the understanding that we instruct them, nor do we have the ability to command them. And that's really what we're supposed to be doing, is commanding them. And if they don't perform, then we remove them. And we don't sit around waiting for another election so they can serve up somebody else. So that's a concept that common law was built on. The judge is in a very vicarious situation. I only argued my petition of right, which comes from the preamble. The preamble of the Constitution is the duties of the American people to maintain order and tranquility in their society. The Bill of Rights, which comes from Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry, out of the Anti-Federalist Papers, that is the declared weapons and armor that we were given to actually enforce and instruct and command our representatives.
And specifically, this case, you were using the Seventh Amendment to the Bill of Rights, and I was there I was there in the court that Wednesday. It almost appeared to me as if the judge was deliberately misunderstanding you or misrepresenting you and going out of her way to not understand where you were, because you were very clear on the Seventh Amendment, your right under common law to demand a trial by jury.
Right.
And if you could go into greater detail on the Seventh Amendment there and why.
Yeah, the Seventh
how
Amendment.
How that applies to your case specifically too.
Yeah, the Seventh Amendment is really one of the most powerful weapons that we were given. The reason, and when you get into the Florida Rules of Civil Procedure, it actually elaborates that all decisions, and I mean all decisions, that are to be made in a proceeding are made by the jury deliberation. So arguments are brought to the jury to decide if the case is dismissed. So all motions, it actually uses the term in the Florida Rules of Procedure that say all issues. Well, an issue is just a decision that needs to be made. And what it's supposed to do is supposed to do two things. And this is where I kind of, while I know we are against the bar associations, and I know that the attorneys don't understand this type of law, they're actually not. If they are part of the American people, they are supposed to understand this kind of law. If they are trained sorcerers of words, they have been trained inappropriately because they never got the foundational concept of individual rights before they were trained in word sorcery. And that's where we are right now. That's a lot of the problem. So they don't understand it. And because all of our judges are bar members who have been trained under this verbal sorcery, they don't understand it either, and they don't understand there's two systems. So really, while the issue on the table is the books, the issue on the table is the behavior, the hearing. I utilize the hearing to cut some really rigid lines between what is equity and what is individual right law that come from the people. Equity, and this is interesting if you want to get into, I don't know if you want to go this far, if you want to get into law theory, that's a yes or no?
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Sure.
So let's get into law theory at its basic premise. In law theory, we call it a docket. Okay? What we are really saying is the information for each case remains at the dock. The reason it's called a dock is because that is where the water meets the land, right? At the dock, you can decide whether you are going onto the land or you're going out to sea on a boat. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Equity lives in admiralty maritime law, which is commerce law, business law, contracts, right? Business relationships and contracts has nothing to do with rights. Okay. That is water law. That is on the water, right? It's controlled by the tides. The tide is what we call democracy or public opinion. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
Okay, so if a storm comes in, that law gets pushed all over the place based on the storm. Make sense?
It does.
If we go to common law, we go to fact law, and we go to the land, and on the land, that is individual rights law or individual duties law. That law is actually law. This law is not law, it is legal, legalese. So this is where attorneys play. This is where the people play.
And the reason you're so good at unraveling the layers of this, Bob, because we're coming up to a very important argument or distinction that you brought up in the court when I was there Wednesday. But I mean, what you brought up about establishing jurisdiction, right? I mean, this seems like this is where you're going to with this. This is going to become very important with making that distinguishing between
cut the
having
line,
jurisdiction,
cutting that line down.
yeah.
And that's exactly what I was doing. Is I was
because this is I mean, I know where this is going. That's why I
Right.
wanted you to flesh this idea out. Yeah.
So jurisdiction is everything, and let me layer in jurisdiction. This is the best example,
Sure.
right? Because I got into a discussion about the 14th Amendment the other day, and as we were discussing the 14th Amendment, they were talking about the 14th Amendment established citizenship, and the 14th Amendment basically says that everyone has the right to due process of law. Well, that's great, but remember the whole big P, little p thing? That's actually true. Here's why. The 14th Amendment came out of Reconstruction, okay? That amendment doesn't give the people on the territory at common law the right to due process. It actually gives legal entities the right to due process. And it establishes U.S. citizenship. Okay? Well, U.S. citizenship is not the American people. The American people are superior. U.S. citizenship is the relationship of an individual with another international nation. We don't walk around our country saying, I'm a U.S. citizen. When you're in Europe, you say, I'm a U.S. citizen. That is the only purpose of U.S. citizenship, because everybody here is the people who are here that, and I want to get into the whole illegal alien thing. I don't want to go down that road. The system's very infected right now. It has a virus. It has either a bacteria or a virus. Okay, it's very broken right now. So, the American people are humanity. The Constitution is written in humanity of individual rights. U.S. citizenship is a relationship with an international organization And we have to define this very, very rigidly, because these are the terms, and this is what I was doing in there, is I was trying to cut the line on equity and common law to basically bring out the fact that there are two systems. This system, power, comes linear from the bottom up because each person has rights. This system is for contractual commerce exchanges. We're not a capitalistic society. We are a commerce society. Capitalism is piracy. Take what you can, leave nothing behind, destroy everything. Commerce is the mutual exchange of goods and services for the benefit of both parties. That is what commerce is. So the little p represents a legal entity or a corporation. Aristotle and Plato use the word corporeal. Well, you are corporeal as a person, which Aristotle would call you a biped, right? So in the biped construct, you are corporeal because you have organs, which we call organisms, which is organization, right? So these words cross over into basically everything. We have to understand not only how they cross over, but we don't want to call your liver your spleen, because that's a problem. Right now, what we've said is the whole system is one individual. There are no organs inside, and there's only one ruling factor, which is make myself happy on earth. Well, that's not the way this works. That's herd mentality. That's democracy, and that's what killed Plato or Aristotle. Or I'm sorry, Socrates. Right? The herd of democracy is what killed Socrates because they were angry. So our forefathers said, you know what? We're going to divide it in half, and we're going to go with the teachings of Jesus Christ and say, you're the temple, you're the kingdom, you are an individual, you have rights, you will have to put on the full armor of God, you will have to stand fast, because society in its tides are going to push on you, but we're going to give you these things at common law to push back. And
now, back to your case, I got the impression that the judge didn't understand the distinction that you were making between the common law, law of the land, maritime law, law of the sea,
law of equity,
right. And the distinction between the two and the jurisdiction between the two, and how you wanted this. You were having this case. You were bringing this case in a common law court, and either she was being willfully ignorant or she was just twisting your words. And I don't want to put words into her mouth either, but I got the impression that she was hearing none of it, right? I mean, or either. Right. But by the end, I saw some little chinks in her armor that you were getting through to her a little bit at the end.
Right.
But
well, you got to remember these judges, and while I don't give everyone the benefit of the doubt, I judge on their actions. Okay. But I also have enough understanding to know a lot of these judges right now, this whole sovereign citizen movement thing, it has no teeth. And that's
is that
problem.
the crux of the matter? Not before I lose my train of thought. Was that? I just want to make sure I'm clear, so we're clear for our audience too. Is the crux of the matter between equity, maritime law, law of the sea, and common law, law of the land? Is it when you were arguing jurisdiction? That is the whole crux of that. Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear on that as well.
There were some other things I was arguing in that. One of them was because I'm petitioner.
Because everything else flows from that, right, Bob? Yeah.
Right. If we're not and you have to think of it. The easiest way for me to explain this stuff to people is that, I try to do what our philosophers did. What they did was they realized that man, the human brain, cannot conceptualize an idea. So what they did is they tried to give things on earth that actually brought that idea into a rational understanding by using other things to display that idea. Does that make sense?
It does. It kind of reminds me of Sartre's definition of consciousness, where you have to be conscious of something, right? I mean,
right. You have to give it tangibility. So what you do is we call them adapters in our apps or in our computer system, right? We have this construct system, right, that we call the operating system, right? You can call that the universe, and then we plug adapters in it to give it this perspective understanding of what are we talking about it. But those adapters are tangible so that we can rationalize the idea. When we plug words into a sentence, we have to know that there's three parts to every word, right? There is the word, however it's harmonically spoken or written. And then we have the essence of the word. We call that the preamble. And then we have the definition, which are the words that are adapted into a construct that actually give it an understanding, right? So the best way to explain it is to like I was writing I wrote a definition for person, right? I would say an updated definition of person. I don't have my phone. I'll give you the gist of it. So when I wrote it, I had to be cognizant of a couple things. Number one, I had to have a preamble. What is the purpose of me writing this? And the purpose of me writing this definition is to basically establish, to cut a surgical line right down the middle between a flesh human being and a corporation. Okay? So the words are somewhat harsh, but they're harsh because we've been convoluted into the system, and we have to start cutting these and separating them so we know the difference between positive and negative, right? So that is the purpose of me writing this. The second part was, so in its application, it says in accordance to the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution for the United States, the Bill of Rights, law and legal theory premise, right? So that's where we're going to apply this. And then it says the definition of a person is a carbon dioxide emitting fleshly sleeve biped with the ability to do the following: speak words, do arithmetic, basic mathematics, gain knowledge, and withstand an examination to determine of opinion to determine a reasonable fact. So that is the definition of a person that is independent and free. And then I have another definition that's pre-person I'm still working on, which is basically before the age of reason, or a person that cannot grasp what's being put in front of them is in fact reasonable and nearly factual. They refuse to acknowledge it. That is not the person that is written into the Constitution. That is more of a child behavior of I want to be right. And we have a massive amount of that right now in our society because it was taught to us. It was taught to remain that way. So
it's all a war. It's all a war of words.
It's
a word game, but it's a words are weapons right here. And they have one definition. They have one definition in common use. They have one definition in a court of law under the law when they're used legally as well. But this
legally versus lawfully.
Legally versus lawfully.
Right.
We are just it's a semantical.
Yes. I believe that one of the things that are going to come out of this, and I call it the Reformation.
How do we cut through the crap? How do we cut through the bull feathers here?
Well, first we have to get the system divided where we have a mechanism to cut through. Once we get the system separated, and we can really get an understanding that equity court is not the people's court, and the people's court is superior to equity, and we can bridle that beast. Then I think we can start to really get some traction on reeling in those consented things that we've let run for too long. But first we got to get an anchor point. You got to drop anchor somewhere, and whether it's in the most painful spot or the easiest spot, you're going to have to walk through, but you got to have an anchor point to walk from. You got to have perspective. We were just talking about,
And you got to start from the beginning. Most people don't. A few months ago, I didn't know the difference between, common law and equity law. And how the Constitution was written under common law as well.
Right. And that's something that's been revealed over time. I didn't put it together probably until about a month ago. I knew that common law existed, but I really didn't understand what common law was and what its purpose was, and I had to read enough books on it that it actually came. And there was one book, I can't remember the book that I figured out where it really told me that common law was about individual rights. Or no, rights were property.
Rights
Our
or
property.
Okay.
Okay, remember I told you everything that's an idea has to be conceptualized in a physical realm. The best convergence of right is property. So when
Makes
you're reading the Bible, like we talk about this, the New Jerusalem, we talk about the Israel, we're always talking about land, right? But what we're not realizing is there is this law theory in common law that converted real estate concepts into law and rights. So it's very interesting concept, and this is what they did. I mean, it's literally written repeatedly. We just never picked it up. So the declaration. So you have the Declaration of Independence, right? What is the Declaration of Independence? You know, you'll hear people say, "Well, the Declaration's the spirit." And then you'll hear these terms, right? But these terms don't really get locked down into what exactly did the Declaration do, and really what is a declaration? What is the Declaration? And these are the words that have been written down, and we just don't grasp the concept. In theory of law, in a republic, we're a nation of laws. So in theory of law, what are we actually saying? Well, the Declaration of Independence. So up until the time that our forefathers signed the Declaration of Independence, they were actually considered Englishmen. Okay? So they were under the crown of England. And just like the barons of 1215 came to the king with the Magna Carta and brought forth the Magna Carta, which, oh, by the way, was actually overturned by the Pope. Pope Innocent, I believe, is the one who overturned it, which then led to an all-out war until 1224 when they brought forth the second Magna Carta. So what happened was, and a lot of people don't know this, it wasn't just the tax on tea. There was and it even says it in the Declaration, it was a long train of abuses. Well, it went back 20 years. I've got writings from Benjamin Franklin 20 years prior where he actually is saying it's inevitable that this is going to happen. Like America will leave England. It's going to happen. So he saw it coming a mile 2 decades earlier.
Oh, Thomas Paine said the same thing. I mean,
Yeah.
how does a little tiny island,
Right.
however many thousands of miles away, rule over a landmass, however many times, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Right.
10, whatever the size differential between just America as a landmass versus England. I mean, it's
Right.
it's just basic logic will tell you that this is not sustainable in the long run.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not. It
Yeah.
never is. It just it can't. The problem with aristocracy is that you get the unpredictable king who's the spoiled child, and we revere him for his heritage, right? Or we revere him or them for their bloodline. We're always worried about bloodlines. We're always worried about that. That's aristocracy. But Jesus was the carpenter's son. You want to be king? Be king. It's your relationship. It's your temple. You're the kingdom. You have, and what he was saying was you have rights, human rights, humanity rights. That is what the Constitution is written in, and that is what the Declaration was. So what the Declaration really was it was a convergence from Englishmen to American people. Okay, because remember, there's no government at this point. It was the transition. It was the marker that it's just like when I objected. When I objected in the courtroom, I'm like, I object, right? What I'm doing is I'm driving purchase points into the ribbon that's happening in front of us inside the courtroom, saying, okay, that's grounds for appeal. Every time I objected, she overruled me. I was actually giving lawful grounds for appeal because I didn't consent to what was being said. And that's why she kept trying to get me to stop objecting, because she wanted it to be smooth so they could just go on about their business with their little friends, and I was creating a ruckus. But it's my right to object. And it's my duty to object, because if I don't object, I consent, because complacency is consent for anybody else to do whatever they want. So, and that's how the courtroom works.
We're talking about basic first principles. I'm thinking about the philosophical implications of how you structure and manage civilization. I mean, we're talking about
Yes.
the abstraction of language. And you're talking about how Aristotle had make some concrete connection with language to something in the physical world. I'm thinking about even how, in the beginning, you think about the first verse of the book of John, where in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and how Jesus was the Word became flesh. I mean, we are talking about some heady philosophical ideas here, but they are the crux of how we as people maintain a civilization, and that has gotten lost in the shuffle. And I'm kind of just circling around to how everything in court is a war of words.
Well, you're a battle. That's what the courtroom is.
Yeah, but I mean,
It is
words
it's a
and
battleground.
language is an abstraction. So it's the important how important it is to make language concrete. I mean, the concrete application from language.
Yes.
And it's a lot of things that I'm having a hard time verbalizing it right now, because it's just really heady philosophical crises that we as a species, as a life form have been dealing with since time immemorial.
Since Adam named everything.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Adam named everything.
Yeah.
What we didn't understand was words. So it's funny, when we're kids, you always hear, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what we didn't realize was words have caused nations to be created or destroyed.
Yeah.
That's how powerful they are.
Yes.
When they're spoken, they're powerful.
Yes.
When they are
Written into law.
they stand the test of time.
Yes.
And that makes them very dangerous.
Yes.
So are those words of intent, of good or of evil? And not only are those words spoken or written intent of good or evil, but have they been spoken from the mind of ignorance or the mind of reason? Is it a 40-year-old, 10-year-old speaking those words? Or is it someone who is actually educated, not programmed? And this is where we've given too much credit to certificates, and our educational, well, they're not educational institutions, our programming mechanisms of institutions. We call schools and universities and colleges, because they are doing nothing more than pulpit preaching, telling everybody what the facts are. Mm-hmm. So words are they cause nations to rise and fall, and they can, just like Hitler, they can destroy or they can create. Mm-hmm. And we don't understand the power of the word, and that's why no animals actually speak words, or at least express ideas. Mm-hmm. That's what makes us so dangerous. Mm-hmm. Or so divine.
Mm-hmm. So let's introduce the concept of the grand jury. I mean, there used to be grand juries were assembled up until, was it the 1930s? I mean, when did
no, they still
they still do. But I mean,
have
there
them.
was I remember reading a pamphlet. I don't know if it dealt with prohibition or whatever the case. I'm drawing a blank on it. But I mean, we used to regularly assemble grand juries up until the first third of the 20th century. How does the grand jury tie in with common law?
Well, so you have to. So this is actually a great question, because we can tie some other concepts into this. Mm-hmm. So you have to remember that anything that, and this is going to be a very interesting expression. Anything that has been bestowed to a government representative came from the people. Okay. We know that the Constitution was written in common law. Okay, there's numerous documents that express that. We know that the Bill of Rights is written in common law. But what we didn't understand was the spring that brought forth the river. So the spring, or the genesis of these abilities for government representatives, flows out of the people. So as the spring brings forth its power, right? It heads down the river and it is bestowed, right, to individual representatives. We call them public officers and agents.
And somewhere along the line, they lost track of who works for who.
Well, somewhere along the line, we stopped.
We
holding them
did too,
accountable.
yeah.
We
stopped holding them accountable.
and we
That's
let the
true.
little
Yeah.
puppies get in charge, and now they're little crying, whining, little fearmongers running around doing all kinds of stupidness, like whatever. The last night with Trump is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I actually laughed. I thought it was funny, because how it's going to end. If we think of this thing as like a bunch of strings running out from this spring, right? And then all of a sudden we find a bad apple, right? Fruit of the poisonous tree. Oh, well, nope. Cut that hair off. You're out, right? So that's how this is supposed to work. What's happened is somebody opened up the spring and then told the spring that these people take care of everything. Just go enjoy your life. Go enjoy. You believe how many people I run into that complain all the time about our government or about the acts of our government representatives. And when you tell them, like, hey, show up here, do this or do that, try to.
No, I'm too busy.
Oh, I'm busy.
Yeah.
I had some stuff to do. That's how we got here.
Yeah.
That's literally how we got here.
Yeah.
Because we, as a republic and a nation of laws, we have the duty to bind and bridle the beast. And if we don't, well, what happens when you take the puppy and leave it in the house and you never trained it at all? It pisses and craps everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, guess what's happening? The puppies are pissing and crapping everywhere. Yeah. And now it's a dog that's trained in its ways, and we're coming back going, I should have trained you as a puppy. Yeah. Now I'm going to train you. And the dog's going, I don't know what? I've been doing this for years. Yeah, I know. It's really bad. We messed up. So, but that flow of power, and this is something that came out when I tried to, again, surgically cut equity away from with the attorneys, cut them away from the people. And that was the part, and this was purposeful, where he had made the argument. He stood up, I forgot, I think it was Patrick Dugan, stood up, and he's standing at the podium. I didn't go to the podium. I don't really care for that. I like to walk around. I would like to walk around the courtroom, actually, the way we should do it. I teach better that way. Anyways, so he made an argument that he has a right to represent his client. And this is because I put him on warning that if he proceeds, he will be part of the grand jury indictment in itself. So he tried squirming his way out of it on that concept. Well, when I rebutted that argument, I came back with, I agree. And I even looked at it, I said, I agree with him. He does have a right to represent his client. The corporation of the school board in a commerce exchange at equity dealing with another company under contract law, under equity law, for money and relationships. But over here, power flows from the people up, and we can yank that cord anytime we want. We allow you to exercise those contracts. But if we don't consent, we object, and you're not going to do it. And that's called a command. So he's trying to represent his client at equity and the place where power comes from, where they get their existence from. It doesn't work like that over here. Okay? So that was the line I was trying to cut to tell him, you are not allowed to wage war against the people. We're the ones that allow you to exist. And I said that this whole place is at the consent or objection. And this whole case is an objection to the poor behavior of public officers and agents, and they'll be punished because we are here and we are mad. And I think I even pointed at them and said they will be punished. Well, those men who sit over there are sworn by oath of office officers and agents of the court. And it is the people's court that we allow them to orchestrate in. They are just as subject. In fact, they're a greater subject than the actual school board itself, because they wield the words of construction and destruction. They're more dangerous.
Now, ultimately, we need to get this to a trial by jury. And after when you came out of the courtroom that day, you told me that there were certain moments when you either objected or let's just say you objected, and then you got some appeal on the record where there was a moment where you objected, you made a statement, the judge proceeded, and you told me because of this exchange of events, it opened a window for you to continue the appeals process to ultimately get it to the Supreme Court. Now, I know I'm paraphrasing what you told me,
Right.
and I'm not saying it fully and as comprehensively as you said, but I'm just trying to bring this out again,
Yeah.
because there were moments where you said it did, I knew you hit a home run that day, but I wanted you to go over again, for myself and also for the record and for the audience, what exactly happened in that courtroom where you objected, where you got particular statements on record that you knew would ensure that your case would continue along the appeals process and maybe even get to the Supreme Court. There were moments in the court where you knew that you had something on the record that's going to make sure that this continues moving forward.
It'll go as high as of a court that until they submit. It's just we're not going to go all the way to the Supreme Court unless they don't submit.
Sure.
And then we'll just keep riding the wave. Mm-hmm. So in reality, and there are some of them that I made that were kind of clever, where it was talking about, he had made a comment about the fact, he started saying fact. Well, when you say a fact, you have to be in a common law court. So he was trying to use our words that we possess, the trial by jury possesses, because when you make the separation, you cut the line on equity versus common law. Common law is the only court where facts can be determined. Equity is a court of opinion. So he was trying to wield one of our words that are not his words. Those are his opinions. And he started and I was waiting for everybody to laugh when I said it, because I objected the fact that the legislators are wise.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, while there was a tinge of sarcasm in the objection, in reality, the objection was surgically placed to make sure we are going to drive this point home. You don't make facts. You make opinions. And if you want a fact, come over to where facts are made on the land. And that was the purpose and point. Now, I was a little sarcastic when I said it, because I alluded to.
No, but it makes sense.
You are saying that that you are stating it's a fact, that the legislature is wise, and I even did a compensatory pause, and I went, I haven't seen much wisdom come out of the legislature at all. So that's an opinion. And that's where the judge responded, because she was angry. Yeah. Right? I made her mad. I really don't care. Yeah. But that's where the judge responded with, well, that's your opinion. And I was like, well, I agree. That actually is my opinion, because I already know that in this place, facts can only be determined by a jury in a declaratory judgment of fact. So she played right into me, and I literally, I agree. It is my opinion. I'm just the one saying it's my opinion. He's the one construing that the legislators are wise and that we should listen to them. But our job is to command them, which was the whole point of that entire objection. So there was this philosophical maneuvering to construct a foundation to be able to drive these linear words home, to be able to use them as razor blades to cut them apart and really peel back, separate the skin from the flesh.
So you did that. I mean, you did that to greatly illustrate the distinction between equity law and common law.
And opinion.
And opinion.
And
opinion and
fact.
Yes, that's great. I mean, that is a great.
So,
That's great.
And that was the whole purpose of the objection itself. It wasn't just me, and I think she took it as I was being, sarcastic towards the attorney. I don't think she really realized I was moving a piece on the chessboard purposely to drive a point that is going to be one of the anchor. We say we need anchor points, right? One of the anchor points of this entire part of getting the common law system up and running again.
Were there any other instances when you objected where you said I got him on this point?
Well, I mean, obviously, in the beginning when I objected to jurisdiction. So what we don't understand about jurisdictions is that we move in and out of jurisdictions all the time. We just don't understand how jurisdictions work. We don't understand that jurisdictions are actually the contractual relationship between two things that are interacting with each other. In other words, we have a jurisdictional relationship with oxygen, okay, because we breathe oxygen. So if we go to an environment or a jurisdiction where it's lacking oxygen, we kind of have a problem because we can't survive in that oxygen deprived environment.
And this is a great point on the different definitions of words like jurisdiction. I mean, when I think of jurisdiction, not even more often than not, I think of like a location. I mean, a physical location. I mean the sheriff or this police department has jurisdiction over here. This district attorney has jurisdiction over here, but whether it's a county or it's a township or a state or wherever the case may be. But here we are talking about the jurisdiction between law, between common law, between equity law. Between
nature and
human, between the difference between law and legality and legalese. So I mean that's the differences in jurisdictions that we are talking about right now, and it's not easy to see the distinctions there, right? I mean, because we've become lazy over several generations, so it's not easy to show people the distinctions between between even these forms of law or these legal forms of law, I guess maybe
law and legal.
Depends
on what you're talking about.
So I mean, it's hard to understand the distinction in jurisdiction here.
It really is, so let's walk through. I think the easiest way to really lock this thing down. I came up with an analogy. Actually, it wasn't an analogy. It actually happened, and I just recognized what I've termed, because I don't really have a better term, is a jurisdictional shift. Okay?
Makes sense, yeah.
So a jurisdictional shift, and I'll give you an example. You do it all the time. You just don't know that you are actually conducting a jurisdictional shift, okay, by action. And you didn't realize you actually moved yourself out of common law into equity at the flip of a hat, and then you bounced right back. So let me show you how you did it, and you do it all the time. And you're gonna realize, oh wow. So you are driving down the road, right? Now, I don't want to get in the whole argument about driver's licenses and everything else. We're not supposed to have them. We're not supposed to have license plates. That's a commerce thing. That's an equity thing. Okay, that's a whole nother discussion if you want to get into it. So in presenting a jurisdictional shift, you're driving down the road and you decide that you want a drink. Okay? So you pull into a store. All right? At this point in time, you are the American people at common law. Okay? You get out of your vehicle, you are the American people at common law and the Bill of Rights. You go into the store. You are the American people at common law. You go to the back and you open the door, right? You are the American people at common law. You take the bottle out, right? You got the bottle. Hold on, I got my bottle of water here, right? You grab it in. You are the American people at common law touching a legal entity's property. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Because it's a company. They're operating, right? It's a public place. They're operating at the consent of the people to actually operate that company in that town, in that place. Should the people say they don't want it to be anymore, they just have a declaratory judge that says, we don't want you here anymore. And that company shuts down. They're no longer allowed to exercise their business in that place. Make sense? Okay. So you are touching a legal entity's property, right? Because they're a legal entity, corporation, corporeal, right? And you walk up to the cash register, all right? So you scan in, all right? It's still theirs. You pull out your credit card, and you plug your credit card into the machine. At the moment that your credit card entered the credit card machine, you took off the American people hat, you put on the corporate equity consumer hat, okay? You're operating in legislative equity law, okay? And there is a commerce exchange taking place. Once that exchange ends, you pull your card back out. You put it in your wallet, and the receipt prints. As soon as that receipt prints, you have taken off the equity hat, consumer hat. You have put on the American people hat at common law with private property and a confirmation of reception, which is what a receipt is. That's why the court says received. Or when I entered the exhibits, right? I said I want to enter these exhibits. They didn't want those exhibits going in. They tried to avoid getting them in, but I had already put them on the docket, so they couldn't avoid it. And she said the court will receive these exhibits as they've already been put into the docket in another document, right? The court will receive. To get a receipt, it's the same word. That receipt gives you private property you now have the power to defend. You are the American people again, to go on about your business. So this is what's called a jurisdictional shift and then switch back. You shift yourself out of the American people at a commerce exchange, and then you do a switch back into your American people position with private property. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes, it does. It does.
So, but to understand it, you would have to break down. You are literally shifting jurisdictions all the time. You are a parent that goes to a school. You are the American people. But when you are there, you are the representative of your ward, right? And your job is to raise the ward. It is your ward. Well, I'm not going to get into the whole trust thing. So,
But the moment you put on that equity hat and engage in an exchange with the corporation and enter into equity law, maritime law, you better know the legal and lawful definitions of words and the definitions and the meanings that those words have when you were in that equity court of law, because they oftentimes mean they have radically different meanings. They have a different meaning in that court of law than they do in common usage. And if you aren't an expert on what the words mean in the equity maritime court of law, you better have someone by your side who does, right? Or you could get yourself in a lot of trouble.
You can get yourself into an insurmountable amount of trouble.
Yeah.
And just in a simple commerce exchange.
Yes.
And these are the questions that we never we don't really ask these questions. Like, why is it, actually this is great. July 4th this year, right? I was hanging out with some friends, right? And we're getting ready to watch fireworks, whatever. And the gentleman that was with me was a retired police officer, not a sheriff, police officer, which are very different things. Okay? Police officer from Minnesota. And as I started to elaborate to him his job, he actually came to realize he had spent most of his career breaking the law and people's rights. It was like this bomb went off in his brain. And I explained to him why. And he was so mad at his representatives. He was so mad at his police chief. He was so mad at his administrators because he's like, everything we were doing was to violate people's rights. Yeah. I'm like, yes, it was. Because they were helpless and no one could defend them from their ignorance and they were taking advantage of. And that's a problem we have right now, is that people are ignorant because of the poor education that they've been given, and they are being taken advantage of, and that's why they're so angry. They can't get justice because they don't even know where to find it. And you can get yourself into a ton of trouble very quickly, especially now, because our system is running on this accusation stupidity that's going on, right? So recently I was asked about the whole. There's a guy, and again, I don't watch TV, and I don't surf the net. I don't really do that stuff, so I don't know these people's names. But it doesn't surprise me, the stuff that's happening. But I watched a video, and it was on one of the interviews I had. He was a CIA contractor. He worked for the government. Well, then he woke up, realized something's really wrong, went and opened this whatever, and now the FBI or whatever has labeled them a terrorist organization, right? But they're also labeling the parents terrorist. That's how stupid they are. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
So, and the interesting part is I'm looking at this guy, right? This guy gave his whole life to the government, which I basically did, right? I started in the military when I was 20, and till I was 43, I basically worked for the government. So in one capacity or another. So this guy, they turn on him and they're labeling all these things, and now they're calling, the FBI is calling him a bunch of terrorist organizations and this and that. And I'm like, well, that's, and my response to it, they're like, what do you do? Like, they're going to call you this, they're going to label you this. I said, well, I mean, if they come say that to me, the first question's going to be, I'm really happy you have an opinion. Why don't we go down to the trial by jury and get it declared a fact? Because if it's not a fact, you're mine. And I'm coming. So, but I have that sword, and I understand that sword. And we're all supposed to have that sword. We just don't know that once we get the fact that facts are determined over here, not over here, and dumb FBI or whatever dumb you want to get with wants to throw a label on somebody, well, I'm really happy you have an opinion. Is it a fact? Well, let's take it where facts are found and find out.
This whole conversation today, Bob, is reminding me of, I think it was in Plato's Republic, Book 8, where he's talking about why free societies eventually devolve into tyranny. And he said pretty much the crux of the matter is that as societies become more and more free, people become inundated with choice because we have, the leisure. People have free time. They have, more ways and forms of entertainment and diversion. And as societies, they start, they rise up, they have a nascent stage, they flower. They become decadent, they become opulent, and what happens is that the collective subconscious of the people becomes overwhelmed with all the choices. It's just we have so many things to choose from, and we see how appropriate that is to our world today. Where there's just so much going on every day. It's like information overload because there's just so much information out there. Yeah. And I find the application to the Republic there, where what gives rise to tyrannies? It's because we as a people become overwhelmed with our choices, that the collective subconscious actually demands a tyranny. And I almost feel like civilization almost has to be brought to the brink of annihilation before it wakes up to this truth, right? Because it wasn't until we were brought to the brink of annihilation here that we start questioning, why is our legal system so convoluted, so corrupt? I mean, why do so many people get railroaded by the legal system? So
Right.
I mean, the fact that we have been brought to the point which we feel like we may be on the brink of annihilation. We feel like we're there.
We're in Reformation. We're about to restructure this thing
That's
again.
what's forced our hands
Yeah.
to seriously look at where we got off course, right? And it brings us back to, we got off course from the common law. We lost the understanding that we as the people, we have the rights, we have the powers. We are the ones that have hired and elected these people to rule, or to not even rule, but I mean to manage our government, if you will. And I mean that's not the right word, but we've lost track over time where we got off course, and it's because that necessity has forced our hand here, has forced our hand. I mean, now that we see what the world is in, perpetual explosive chaos every day, and that is what's forced us to really take a hard look at where we got off course.
Yeah,
Right?
In throughout history and time, and this is an interesting part about the Constitution. We harp on the Constitution, and I don't want to get into the part about we don't understand it. But what I do want to get into,
I guess what I'm saying is I still have hope. I'm still optimistic. That's what I mean. What I said.
I think we're about to see a transition.
I do too.
That is going to be global.
Yes.
Global resurrection of probably as close to peace as you can get in the physical realm.
I agree.
And I think we had to get this far.
I agree.
You have to go through, even Dante, if you read Dante's Inferno, even Dante had to go all the way to the depths of hell.
Yes.
And face the devil himself before he could find purgatory.
Yes.
And then make his way back.
Yes.
There's 3 books to the Divine Comedy. Mm-hmm. There's Inferno, there's Purgatory, and then there's Heaven. Mm-hmm. So everyone talks about Dante's Inferno, but there is 2 other books, right? So there's a part after you go to hell, and we are in that time right now, and it's fortunate for us. Our Creator did a great job, because what he really did for us is he really said, yes, sin will enter the earth. Yes, you will walk among it. Thank God I let them be stupid who can rule in sin. And if you have reason, well, you're going to know. You're going to see it. And you're going to see the patterns of what's happening. Mm-hmm. So, it's, at least he gave us that part. What our forefathers gave us is actually fascinating. They moved the power of an army into one person's hand to wield Excalibur. And any person can do it. So if you notice, like in my situation with this litigation, there's nobody else with me. I walk alone. There's no conglomerate. There's no group. There's me alone against the system. And essentially what I'm trying to show is that it's not the herd that wields the sword. It's one person. And that's what our forefathers gave us. They gave us the power of individual rights over the swarm of democracy. And when they said, we're trying to create a more perfect union, what they were trying to create is how much individual rights versus the herd can we get to balance the system. But we're going to have to give each person the sword, and the people who decide to pull it from the stone are the ones who will go down that road. It's interesting. I was talking to a friend, another person recently, and we were talking about courtrooms, what the purpose of courtrooms are. Do you really know what the purpose of courtrooms actually were?
I know why they call it a court is because you are playing a game. I mean,
Well, you are playing a game, so you're on the court.
Yeah.
It was to stop dueling, right? Because little children go out and fight, right, with their fists. But people of reason argue with the double-edged sword of their mouth in the place where it happens. And that's what the court is. Two adversaries wage war of ideas in order to win the battle and win the game. That is the courtroom. It's a battlefield.
Without taking your paces.
Well, you can come back and play again.
Yeah.
Right? So now we don't have to resort to murder. So, yeah. I'm just wielding, I was in the military. I was a convoy security operator in Iraq. I used to drive up and down the roads, been shot at, had my truck blown up, all that fun stuff. Now I wage war in just a different way, but the tactical theory of strategy is still exactly the same. There's nothing different between, I still study the art of war, and I apply those principles that Sun Tzu wrote. I just apply them in cognitive, intellectual warfare, not in physical warfare. Still war.
Yeah, it's the war of words, which brings me back to your case. Now I know you got out of you were in court last Wednesday. What kind of documents? What preparations? What paperwork? What are you working on right now in the interim and before the judge comes back with a decision on how we're going to proceed with this? What are you working on at the present moment with that?
Well, unfortunately, to prep for an appeal, you have to have her response. So you need their opinion
So you're
before you can mess with appeal. And I need the transcripts from the court reporter.
Okay. Have you received those yet?
I haven't received them yet. I'm still waiting. I paid them, so they were working for me at the time. So when I get the transcripts, obviously I'll have the digital or whatever physical readout. Also, I will have I'll have her opinion. If she rules in my favor, we're going to proceed, which will be a very interesting conundrum that's going to happen, because if she rules in my favor, we flip back to common law procedure, right? And it's going to cause a ruckus with the clerk of court, because under common law procedure, they have to maintain a separate docket for common law because it's general law that's established by jury. So you can't have it in the circuit court. It has to be separate. So, and it can't be in an equity court. It has to be on its own line because it creates law for the county. So that's going to cause some problems, because that's what they were supposed to be doing the whole time. And that's one of our issues right now is clerk of court problems. And we have a lot of clerk of court problems. Also, it will, now we're looking at, I'm going to get the emergency injunction. I'm going to get the books sequestered. I'm going to get the writ of execution. And I'm going to possibly get an authorization to present in front of a grand jury for indictment of, the elected representatives, plus now the three attorneys over there have been put on notice that they will now be included in the indictment. So that could rattle the entire cage. I don't know, because now you have basically something unprecedented where an American person has taken their power and unleashed it on the political subdivisions.
And if she doesn't approve, you have grounds for appeal
Yeah,
based upon when you
Yeah.
objected and when he said facts and you said with regards
Stuff
to
like that, yeah,
why
yeah.
she, well, so you have,
Yeah,
I mean, because
so
you
I
were
have those
taking it from
appeals.
equity to common laws,
Right.
to common courts, you have that in your back
Yeah,
pocket too, should she appeal.
and that just depends on how much we're gonna define. We're gonna, define this thing down. How far are they gonna want to push it for legal law opinion, and what are the arguments, and then the box that we're in right now is that these arguments come out of our founding documents. They come out of the law theory, the philosophy and law theory that they were put into, not the legal opinion argument that has been shoved down our throat all these years. So they're in a tough spot. I don't know what they're gonna do. I would venture to say I'm pretty sure that there's a recording and an audio recording in that courtroom, and I would venture to say that judge has sent that video out to judges whoever she knows to get legal opinion, a lawful opinion, because you got called out about that. So I'm here to make a legal opinion. So I hope you make a lawful opinion, because again, trying to surgically cut away law, theory, philosophy from legal argument and opinion.
Yeah, because I mean, the founding fathers, I mean, they stated explicitly, whether it was in the Federalist Papers or otherwise, but that the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, it is not open to conjecture or really a deep subjective interpretation. I mean, it is the letter of the word. It is the law. It is what any regular human being would read and take from it when they read it. I mean, they all put all their heads together to make it as clear as possible to remove the element of subjectivity. Did they not? I mean, right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. And if you want the most explicit that I found in the Federalist Papers, you can go to Federalist Paper 31, where Alexander Hamilton stated that the Constitution was written to mathematical geometric precision. So if you want to, I mean, unless you're going to interpret Pythagorean's theorem, the words are what they are.
Yes.
It is what it is. Yes. But our Constitution has been living in equity for so long that, now we're like, nope, you guys need to come ashore. And this is how it's going to be, because we haven't taken possession of it. It's our job to take possession of it. And as far as I know, apparently I could be the first person in the country that literally took possession of it. Because I haven't heard of anybody that's gotten this far. Yeah. I don't think anyone's gotten this far. They've argued it, but they've argued it in equity court, not understanding what the actual bifurcation of the argument actually is, to cut the lines down. So, and that's really, what my intent was that day, was to draw lines and separate the system apart, so we could really see it for what it is.
And I think the judge understood that by the end. I got the impression she did.
Yeah. I don't write my speeches, so whatever I say, wherever I go, and I just talk. And I would say that it's funny, I make this comment, and I try to stay humble, right? Because I really have been blessed with a gift, and I'm trying to do good with it. As I gave my closing oration, and it really was an oration, I kind of thought about it, and I was like, I feel like Patrick Henry screaming, give me liberty or give me death. Not in those words.
But we're at that point. Yeah.
But I think I believe we are at that point.
Yeah, I know we're at that point.
I believe we're at that point. There's so much frustration. There's so much anger. People are fed up. Yeah. You have, and this is what an unbridled government will do. And we've been given the power. We just don't understand the code to unlock the gates and do what needs to be done. And that's what's happening now. I think that's what's coming to fruition. And I don't want to say, I say this like I I was given this, I worked really hard and I read a lot of books, but I had a lot of conversations with people, and I had a lot of, if I wouldn't have had the openness to go and talk to different people, I wouldn't have gotten this far without their previous research and their drive and their motivation and stuff like that. So, this was it takes a village to raise a child. It took a village to get me to this point. I just happened to be the one that, lined the system up and see that there really was two sides to the veil. And now I can display it and elaborate on it. And that's the hardest part. The hardest part is, I'm a natural teacher. I've always taught and stuff like that. So I'm used to being up in front of crowds. I'm used to doing my work in public as a fire medic, trainer for years. So, those skills are now playing into being able to sit there in front of an entire courtroom full of people. I honestly think the lawyers were quite uncomfortable because there were a lot of people in there and none of them were on their side. So
it kind of recalls to mind, was it Galileo or Isaac Newton who said, "I only see so far because I stand on the shoulders of giants." I mean, this is a group effort, and it's humbling to know that we are. It takes. I mean, it takes all of us. It takes the entire human race basically to wake up and in one collective movement say, enough is enough, and we're ready to create this new
new world.
Well,
it's going to be a new world.
It's going to be a new world because we are past. We have long crossed the Rubicon here.
I think that, and here's the interesting part.
It humbles us to know that. I mean, to understand our history. To know where we came from.
Yeah. I think, and this is something that's interesting that I've kind of rationalized, or I've tried to come to an understanding on. We've been taught all these trigger words about they're socialist or they're this or they're that, and what we don't understand is we were really made as a nation of all people. We need the people that are capitalistic. We need the people that are philosophers. We need the people that just want to work and do their thing. We need the people that are our theologians, and we need the people that are reporters. We need all these people. But what we really need is we need a proper measurement, and we need to have boundaries for all of them so that we can have each part. We need to have commerce. We need to have capitalism. We need to have a little bit of tyranny. We need to have a little bit of socialism. We need to have, we need this part. And this is something that frustrates people, right? Because, while I'm technically a conservative, right? I would say I'm truly a constitutional conservative in its rawest common law form, okay? Because I really walk the line of common law is the superiority of this entire existence. So I'm probably more constitutional than most anyone you've ever met. But I also understand that we need those other parts also in their proper measurement. We have to, and if you want to go back and talk about it, we give this whole argument against socialism, right? But if you think about it, we have a republic. We have a nation that philosophically came from a guy who actually never had any money, okay? Never had anything that anybody wanted except the thoughts in his brain, that lived somewhere, which we're probably going to say was socialism, right? Never worked, but just went here or there or anywhere talking about concepts and ideas.
You're talking about Socrates.
I am talking about Socrates. So we have called ourselves capitalist, and we have said that we have a capitalistic society, and we have a commerce society, but our entire construct of our entire nation was built by a guy that had no money, no job ever, and literally walked around asking people questions and was the divine sage of 400 BC. So let's figure, how does that actually tie together? It doesn't tie together.
Yeah.
It doesn't tie together. We are to be a people first. And we're supposed to be a nation of all peoples. And we are to have all those peoples in our nation because our diversity is what gives us the most amount of strength. Well, our diversity in our education is what gives us the most amount of power. And that's what our education system has failed on. They have isolated us into, you're a doctor, you don't know anything about the law. You're a lawyer, you don't know anything about the law. Technically, lawyers don't know anything about the law because the law is common law. They know legalese. So we gave them credit where they didn't even belong, right? And we've divided up our education system. And then you take a guy like Aristotle that wrote on categories and topics and animals, and all of a sudden he's in law theory, and then he's in rhetoric, and he's in poetry, and cross the system. Here's Aristotle, one of the greatest.
He more than
minds.
anyone understood the idea of taking an abstraction in language and making it concrete, right?
Yeah. You know what's interesting? It's funny because I started with my philosophical journey started with Plato, and for me, like where I and I think I told you this, I didn't read the Bible up until 2020. I only read Revelations from the time I was 12. In 2020, I started to study the Bible, but I was also really diving deep into Plato and the dialogues. And what happened was I could grasp the ideas of Plato better than I could grasp the Bible. Okay? So for that, it spoke to me more than the Bible did, but I could see the relationship between the concepts and ideas between both of them. So what I try to tell people is, just like the Declaration of Independence is the spirit, Plato is your philosophical understanding at a spiritual level. Aristotle is the convergence of the physical realm from the spirit. And that is how, when I look at them, and it took me over 2 years before I actually could understand what Aristotle was saying. 2 years. So, and by that time I had read over 200 books, and I still hold true to Plato, because I just connect at a level that I think is different. But now that I've even got through a lot of Aristotle's works multiple times, I even lean away from Plato, or they're even almost even, where I can go hands up whether I'm gonna Plato or I'm gonna go with Aristotle. And lately it's been a lot more Aristotle than Plato. So, but it took 2 years to even understand what he was saying, what was even being expressed, and to see that Plato was actually. So Aristotle's books are written in Platonic solids. So you would have to, when you read them, you have to figure out what Platonic solid they're actually written in. And then once you figure out the Platonic solids that they're in, then you can actually start to grasp the real ideas that are being expressed. But all of his books are written in Platonic solids.
Where does the New Testament come in here? I see a lot of metaphysics. I see the spirituality. I see poetry. It's almost like, and even more so, the New Testament, straight, it's metaphysics for how to carry yourself in one of these meat vehicles on the earth, almost, right? Because
carbon dioxide emitting,
the epistles of Paul
biped.
just blow me. They're just mind blowing.
Well, here's the interesting part.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Because in the progression, the New Testament comes after Plato and Aristotle. So on the timeline, it comes afterwards.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which means that those writings were written at the time that Jesus walked the earth. I don't know how many times I've found exact phrasing from the New Testament in Aristotle and in Plato. So here's the real question. Jesus, and in time, we talk about time, right? But we just reset the clock when we had Jesus, right? Okay. Jesus did not start his ministry until he was 30. He was dead by 33. 3 years. He only taught for 3 years, right? Okay. Where was Jesus for 30 years? Where was
Well,
he?
he enters the temple at the age 12, right?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he's young, right?
Yeah,
but
he's
you
young.
know, he has
Yeah.
this divine, push, right? And his society is broken at that time, right? Almost like our society is now. And Jesus, sees the pain and the suffering in the people, right? And he has this divine light in him. Okay, so but if Jesus had everything when he
He's observing
started,
and he's studying, right?
but he has to get the knowledge. Well, right about that time is when, the Library of Alexandria existed. There are stories that put Jesus in Alexandria at the library. There are stories that put Jesus in India. If you read the Quran, you read a little story about the Quran, and I've read the Quran a couple times. I really enjoy reading the Quran. There is a lot of real philosophical, it mentions Jesus numerous times, right? Moses and Jesus and the Virgin. Literally, it's like, I'm like, really? Really? What? Because no one went and looked. And look, right? It's merging together. So, what I think happened, or at least what I can, in the journey of a man, right? He had this divine inspiration to learn and grow, and he had been touched at such a young age, but he didn't have all the information. So he had to go seek. That's why he says, go seek and you shall find. Right? Go search for knowledge. Go search for wisdom, and it will be revealed to you. If you are humble and if you are open, you can go find it. And that's what he did. Well, then when he finished and he had these answers, these things, he came back. And he was the prodigal son's return, right? And then as he started his ministry and started his teachings, he was just offending anyone that was in power. He was not going to tolerate it. He stood his ground, and he went to battle. He walked into the temple where there were money changers, and he's flipping tables, calling them out, challenging the powers that be. That's what he did.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
No,
So that's no different than what Socrates did. Well, I would have to say, where do you think Jesus learned to do it?
Yeah.
So I think that Jesus, based on the phrasing of Aristotle and Plato and other philosophers, I would venture that Jesus went to Alexandria, probably traveled, and he gained knowledge and gained wisdom, and he was already highly intelligent, seeking his whole life, and those doors were open, those gates were, that wisdom was revealed to him, and he became the teacher. It says, "Blessed be the peacemakers, for they will inherit," or they will. Is it inherit the earth? What is it?
I think it is inherit the earth.
Inherit the earth. Well, who are the peacemakers? Well, the peacemakers are the teachers. They're not the police officers. They're the teachers, because they bring understanding, they bring knowledge, and they share it. And people gain understanding, are happier, because they're like, so it wasn't me. No, it wasn't you. You just didn't pay attention. So it's, and I think that's where the New Testament converges. It's interesting that the New Testament was written in Greek. Wow, that's fascinating. And then if you read where the books go out, John's in Pergamum. Well, Pergamum is an island in the eastern Aegean Sea. And then he sends it out to all these places that are right around there that are all Greek. And, that's not a coincidence, right? So here we are. We see a timeline convergence of Greek philosophy converged to Jesus, right? Written in the same language. right about the time that the Greek philosophers were ending. Plutarch. I think Greek philosophy had already had its golden age by then. By 100 A.D., basically the philosophers were gone. I think Plutarch was one of the last philosophers, and I think he was right after 100 A.D. So, it's riddled with it.
Yeah.
Because here's the problem. You still come back to the one true problem, which is, what are the laws of nature, and what is truth, and what is a lie, and what is reason? Well, these are the mysteries that have plagued man since man fell. So we're still back to the same thing, no matter how far we go. We're always asking the same questions.
What is real? What is illusion? What is truth?
What
is
is
a lie?
electromagnetism? What is light?
Yes.
What is color? Like you and I just had this whole conversation where I was, elaborating on my perspective.
And all the evidence of history tells us that is not those are not easy questions to answer.
No.
Otherwise, we would have answered them by now, and
That's
we would
right.
all be Shangri-La-di-da-di-da. Yeah.
Right.
So.
And the problem with Jesus' teachings is that Jesus truly is the core manifestation of the idea of individual rights. Individual rights. So it is the core concept of the Constitution and of the Bill of Rights. His teachings are that concept in form. And that's something we never tied together. Thomas Jefferson was actually on a committee where they wanted an amendment. I think it was an amendment, or they wanted it at least elaborated in the Constitution that that they wanted to make sure that we knew, or they passed through history, that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was written as they wanted an amendment under the teachings of Jesus Christ. And then there was this big argument. He actually elaborates on the argument. He says, no, we don't want that. And Thomas Jefferson was really happy, because what he really wanted is, what he saw was the people who were in that room wanted it to be a nation that had never had a king, but it was a nation for all people to find reason and to find wisdom and to be under individual rights and the rule of law. And the law will set us free.
And tying this back to the case that you're bringing against the Sarasota County School Board, is that we're arguing basic first principles. I mean, this idea of understanding the difference between common law and equity law, and entering into a contract with the corporation of the United States of America. I mean, these are basic principles that we as people need to understand, and that's what your case is illustrating so well.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to really, like I said, I use the word surgically, but I really am trying to.
And that's true. That's more than fair. That's accurate. That's precise. You use precise language.
I try. My vocabulary has grown.
And you do. Yes.
So yeah. Absolutely.
So, all right, Bob. Well, I think we've covered many topics today, and I guess we could. What do you think? Wrap it up here for today. All right. Well, my name's Luke Angsteadt. I'm here with the constitutional law expert Bob Craft, and thank you for joining us today.